careful they are, but fear is, anger and rage are secondary emotions.
So to explain that, what do you mean?
Anger is generally an emotion that covers up other emotions. If you had an iceberg and you had like anger at the top, underneath the iceberg, so anger would be at the tip. Underneath the iceberg might be fear, rejection, powerlessness, that kind of thing that escalates fear when someone tends to be abusive.
Okay, so when we see Jodi pulling away from Mr. Alexander and these tirades that he is doing through text messaging, is this evidence of his fear of losing her?
It looks like that to me.
And then in this particular tirade about being upset about her speaking with somebody else, again, her response, when we look at her response, is she, how is her response what do you make of her response?
She's apologetic in her response, but also explaining that he doesn't want to know the details and that maybe it was a mistake not to give him the details, but when she gives him details, he stops her, so she doesn't want to continue giving him details. But she says that nothing she said was untrue.
So when she gives him details, he stops her, but when she doesn't give him details, he accuses her of lying.
Yes.
Is that what is going on here?
Yes.
And then he launches into this text message where he's talking about this particular person, some man that she was just having a conversation with or texting with, right?
Yes.
What do you make of this particular text from Mr. Alexander?
Well, he's angry, he's jealous, he's taking it to an extreme that there's no indication that that's going on, but that's where he's going with it. He seems to blow up, you know, the saying, making a mountain out of a molehill. It seems like that's going on here. And then he starts criticizing her, which is what is pretty consistent in these messages.
His criticism?
Yes.
And how do you take her response at the top here?
Well, there's some assertiveness there. There's some assertiveness about her saying, you know, don't ask me more questions, but also reassurance that she loves him, reassurance that she still cares about him, and advising that they develop a don't ask, don't tell kind of policy, that they don't ask each other about the intimate details or about their social lives, about the people they're dating, that they stop doing that.
And his response to that is to forget each other even exists, right?
Yes.
And again, is he taking that to extremes?
Seems like it, yes.
Okay, so down here, she had asked him to please stop, right? To please stop stop the ranting, right?
Yes, yes.
And he responds to that, doesn't he?
Yeah, he responds with more threats.
Okay, and he tells her that she's going to start to be held accountable for your shiz.
Yeah.
Shiz is another word for a bad word, right?
Yes.
And he talks about how she's pissed him off in ways that she never should have.
Yes.
And he tells her too that he's given her a lot of mercy, right?
Yes.
So basically the way he considers, based on that statement, the way he considers he's treated her so far, he's been merciful.
One of the things we say, people who do a lot of work with perpetrators of domestic violence, is that they have perceptual problems. They seem to have a way of seeing things that a lot of other people wouldn't view them that way.
Okay. And he talks about how times are fixing to get tough for her.
Yes.
Is that another threat?
Yes.
And are you aware that in this text message, he wants the second half of the message that was not intended for him was one of two parts, and he wants the second part, right?
Yes.
And so throughout this text message tirade, he's waiting for her to send the second part.
Yes.
Is that controlling behavior, wanting to have that second part to know what it said?
Yes. It's controlling behavior.
And what does it say, the fact that Jodi is trying to get him the second part of the text message? She's going to give it to him anyway when she's not even living in the same state.
Says the same thing that the whole pattern has said, that she's not out of the relationship yet.
And again, down here at the bottom, is she saying sorry?
Yes, she is.
And that she never means to hurt him?
Yes.
And she talks about how she loves him?
Yes.
And eventually, does Mr. Alexander apologize too?
Yes, he does.
And if we look at the time, knowing that these aren't the accurate times, but I'm talking about the difference in times, we see that this whole thing started at 2:41, right?
Yes.
And it didn't end until 5:54.
Yes.
So 3.5 hours 3 hours and 13 minutes about, right?
Yes.
Does that mean anything to you that this fighting or ranting from Mr. Alexander can last for 3 hours?
At this point, it looks like he does most of the ranting. And to be able to keep your anger going for that long, that takes a lot of energy. Not everybody keeps their anger going that long. Lots of people will calm down prior to that. But he's able to keep it going. He's able to regenerate the energy and that anger by the things that he says. And when you talk aggressively, it's one of the things that a lot of the fellows in my group are working on is the way they talk to themselves, like with road rage or with anything else, that if they talk to themselves aggressively, they tend to feel more aggressive and get more aggressive. So they have to watch the kind of ways that they talk to themselves or talk to other people.
Okay. When we're talking about a message conversation between Arias and Mr. Alexander on May 10th, the next day. Did you review, this is instant messaging, not text. You're looking at text.
Oh, this is the text.
Okay. So we're talking about an instant message conversation that goes back and forth between the two of them.
Yes.
From May 10th. Are you aware of a conversation where they talk about somebody named Wayne Dyer?
Yes.
Do you know who Wayne Dyer is?
Yes, Wayne Dyer's a motivational speaker, and he's considered kind of a spiritual guru as well. He's on PBS a lot, and he's written a number of books.
Okay. And are they having a conversation about this person, this motivational speaker?
Yes, they are.
Are they talking in this conversation about how Mr. Dyer is making a joke out of the fact that he has a temper?
They're talking about Mr. Dyer's daughters teasing him about his temper.
And then from talking about Mr. Dyer's temper, about getting teased by his daughters about his temper, does the conversation turn to Mr. Alexander's temper?
Yes, it does.
And does Mr. Alexander in his own words talk about his temper?
Yes, he does.
And does he compare his temper to Mr. Dyer's?
He does. He says his temper... Sustained.
Neighbor approach? All right, does Mr. Alexander, he compares his temper to Mr. Dyer, right?
Yes, he does.
And does he say that his temper is far worse?
Yes.
Overruled.
Yes, he does.
And not quoting him, but generally speaking, does he talk about how his temper if he were able to harness his temper, he would be unstoppable?
Objection, meeting question incorporates hearsay.
Approach, please.
Ms. Violette, in your review of this case, you've reviewed a instant message conversation between Ms. Arias and Mr. Alexander on May 10th, right?
Yes, I did.
And I'm going to read it to you, and then I want you to tell me how it's important to you,
All right.
okay? Where Ms. Arias says, and again, they're talking about Wayne Dyer,
Right.
this motivational speaker.
Yes.
Ms. Arias says, he jokes about his daughters, tease him about losing his temper, and then she jokes, oh, who's the enlightened spiritual guru? Mr. Alexander answers, yeah, I know, but they see him at his worst, and I promise my worst is worse. Mr. Alexander goes on, so far. And then Ms. Arias says, I've seen your worst. We haven't walked in his shoes, but I take that bet. Mr. Alexander says, ha, yeah, if I could transmit that fury, I couldn't be stopped. To what? I didn't hear
You
you.
read the wrong word.
Yeah, if I could transmit that fury, I couldn't
Transmute.
be stopped.
Transmute.
I said transmute. That's what it says.
I think we're talking about transmit versus transmute.
Correct.
I'm just reading what it says exactly,
All right.
okay? And Mr. Alexander says, that shiz is scary.
Yes.
And Ms. Arias says, you'll master it one day. Did you review this?
Yes, I did.
And is it important to you about Mr. Alexander talking about his temper?
Yes, it's very important to me. A lot of the folks that I work with are afraid of their own anger. They're afraid of how far it's gone. They're afraid of what they'll do with it, and they hope they can control it. It's big energy. It's huge energy. It can make somebody feel very powerful to be that angry, but it is scary for them. And unless they get help, it continues to be scary for them.
And is that what you see in reading this conversation between Mr. Alexander and Ms. Arias?
I see that, and I see that there is an exchange where they're both acknowledging his anger. She's acknowledging that she's seen it, and he's acknowledging that he hasn't.
And I should, for the record, Judge, I'm reading from exhibit number 595. In another part of this conversation, did you review part of the conversation where Ms. Arias is talking about her self-esteem?
Yes, but I'd need to review that.
All right, Judge, may I approach? Yes. I'm handing you exhibit, what's been marked as exhibit 595.
Oh, okay.
So is there another part of that conversation when Ms. Arias is talking about her own self-esteem?
Yes, she is.
And is Mr. Alexander trying to make her feel better?
Well, on and off. I mean, he tells her.
Sustained.
Can you summarize the conversation for us without why you believe that Ms. Arias is talking about her self-esteem?
Well, she's talking about her self-esteem. She's talking about how she feels on the inside and how badly she feels on the inside, and that she was the innocent porn star who now feels lousy about herself.
And so does that give you insight, as of May 10th of 2008, does that give you insight to how Ms. Arias was feeling about herself from this relationship?
Yes.
Because in this, are they talking about their relationship?
They're talking about the relationship.
Sustained.
They're talking about the relationship? Is that a yes?
They're talking, yes, they are.
Okay. Are they talking about other things?
They're talking about,
Yes. Sustained.
What else are they talking about? In summary, of course.
about their sexual relationship. Mr. Alexander is well,
Oh, she's already answered the question.
Sustained.
She has not answered the question. Is Mr. Alexander comparing Miss Arias with other women he's been with?
Question assumes.
Overruled.
yes, he is. He's comparing her to 2 or 3 other women. He's basically saying that she has no sexual equivalent, except for maybe these other 2 women who are okay. But he basically says there's no sexual equivalent to her, and that these other 2 women have been enjoyable, and that there's a 3rd woman who he thinks might have been, but he didn't get far enough along to see.
And in that sense, is that his attempt to try and make her feel better about herself in a sexual way?
I'm sorry, what was the objection?
Speculation is the attempting.
Sustained.
All right, but we know that he was comparing her with other women.
Yes,
Do you know, based on this conversation, were these women before Miss Arias or after Miss Arias?
they were before Miss Arias.
Okay. The fact that he's comparing women on a sexual basis, and he's talking about these women who were in his life prior to being with Miss Arias, does that speak to any type of deception from Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
In what way?
Well, he continues to claim that he's a virgin to numbers of women that he has relationship with, either by virtue of text or IM or in person. And he continues to say he's a virgin. And apparently, prior to Miss Arias, he had sexual relationships with other women.
In your review of this case, did you also listen to a tape recorded, and basically what you would say is phone sex?
Yes,
And was that between Mr. Alexander and Miss Arias?
yes, it was.
As far as domestic violence is concerned, does the fact that they were talking in May, and this tape was made in May of 2008, is that right?
Yes.
And the fact that they were talking in May of 2008 of this nature, does that mean anything to you?
I'm not sure. Does it mean anything in relationship to domestic violence?
Well, yes, in the sense, does it tell you anything about whether or not Miss Arias was completely separated from him?
Well, it indicates that she wasn't
Okay.
completely separated from him.
All right. And is that the indications that you're getting all along here, that she's making steps but not fully separated?
Absolutely.
A journal writing from Miss Arias from May 22nd.
Yes, but I need to see exactly what you're referring to.
All right. Judge, may I approach? Yes. Marked as Exhibit 591. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Now, May 22nd of 2008, is Miss Arias writing about a conversation she has with Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
And generally speaking, not quoting, what is the subject matter of their conversation that she's writing about?
It's the conversation that basically talking about the separation, and that it will be good for both of them. She talks about the laws of chastity, and he gets upset, he gets offended, and tells her he already knows about the laws of chastity.
When she talks about the laws of chastity, is she trying to give him reasons why they shouldn't be physical, good reasons why they shouldn't be physical anymore?
Ms. Stein.
Does she say specifically in her journal writing why she talks to him about the laws of chastity?
She talks to him about the laws of... Yes.
Okay, then what does she say? Generally speaking,
Objection, hearsay.
May continue.
all right, we were specifically looking at if she writes about a reason why she talks to Mr. Alexander about the laws of chastity,
Yes.
okay? And does she give a reason?
Yes, she
Okay,
does.
and what is that?
That it would help them not to be physical. She thinks that their physical relationship needs to end, basically.
Okay, is she trying to give him, like, sweet talk him into reasons why they shouldn't be physical anymore?
Yes, she is.
And from him, you said he got upset.
Yes.
Does she talk about how things got worse after he just gets upset?
Yes, she did.
And how did they get worse?
He wanted to know who she was seeing, or if she was seeing...
The same.
Overruled.
Wanted to know who she was seeing, and basically if she was getting her kicks with someone else, and those kind of questions. And Miss Arias indicated that she didn't freak out when... That
Go
she
ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I said go ahead.
Oh, that she didn't freak out when he was seeing Mimi, and that she had the right to see somebody else if she wanted to see somebody else, but that she wasn't getting her kicks or hadn't been with anybody else since Mr. Alexander.
So when she talks about things getting worse, is it because, based on her writings of the conversation, that Mr. Alexander was acting jealously?
Yes,
And was he then accusatory about her having another relationship?
yes,
At this point in time, is Miss Arias able to actually say, it's okay if I were to have another relationship?
yes, she is.
What does that mean to you?
Means the cloth is torn a little more. It means that the relationship, she's able to assert herself more than she was before, but she's still not out of it. But she's more assertive, she's more able to tell him, and she's more interested, it seems like, in moving on from the relationship.
And the more that this cloth is torn, the more that she's able to speak her mind or be assertive with Mr. Alexander about her ability to talk to other men, what does that do? And I guess you can speak generally with abusive men. The more that their partner is able to assert themselves or pull themselves away, what does that do to an abusive man?
Well, there's more powerlessness involved in it.
And what happens when there's more powerlessness?
There's generally speaking more anger and more rage, because there's more fear when the person, as long as you have that power differential, you're able to feel in control. When you start losing that power, you start to feel loss of control.
And when she talks about does she talk about the fact that he talks to her about his undying love for Mimi?
Yes,
And what are her feelings about that?
she's okay with it. She seems, in her journal, she writes that she's fine with that, and she didn't freak out about it.
And when she talks to Mr. Alexander about it, how does he respond to such a thing? And if you need to review, that's fine.
He apologizes to her.
And does he tell her to leave his love life out of it? I'm looking at page 363.
Basically, he says that he's frustrated because things aren't going well with Mimi.
In this same writing, does she go on to talk about very positive things about Mr. Alexander?
She says that,
Same.
I know that you said she says, but are you going to summarize for us?
yes,
Okay, go ahead.
that
Does he say yes or no?
Restate your question.
Does she talk about does she talk about him in a positive manner?
yes,
And does she go on a bit about how much she cares for him? Or what she thinks of him?
I need to review that.
Sure. So does she speak positively about him?
Yes, she does.
Okay. And does she say that it's sad that they're agreeing to part ways amicably,
Yes,
but that it's something that's good for both of them?
yes,
And in reading Mr. Alexander's journals, does he have that same opinion, that it's good for both of them?
yes, he does.
And Mr. Alexander's journals that we reviewed earlier, that was in late March and early April where he's talking, or I'm sorry, it's early April where he's talking about that it's probably good for them to part ways.
Yes,
But yet, even though they part ways, we saw through the text messages later on that he's still contacting her, right?
yes, he is.
Foundation speculation as to who initiated contact.
Sustained. We are going to take the noon recess at this time, ladies and gentlemen. Please be back in the designated area at 1:25. Remember the admonition. You are excused. Have a nice lunch. Record will show the jury has left the courtroom. You may step down. Counsel, anything else before lunch?